webinar. Let's just get right into it. So my name is Hulda, as you probably are aware. So I've been with the student room since September 2017, continuously working to make campaigns more successful and impactful for the students on site. I also oversee the client services team, which is responsible for the end-to-end campaign delivery of millions of ads and emails. So the sales director here at TSR wanted me to put in the thunderclap. I did once, so I left a quote there for you guys as well, so you can see that. Cool. So just an overview of what we'll be covering today. So first thing we're going to cover is the housekeeping of the data, and then just clearing on TSR. Then we're going to move to display, and then some email, and then just do a quick visual recap of everything that we've covered, and the key takeaways, and then questions, comments, and feedback. So this is my first ever webinar, so I would appreciate some feedback if you guys have any at the end. Cool, so just straight into the data. So the data used for this webinar comes from 1st of July to 31st of August from 2019 and 2020. So in some instances, it's going to be like combined data, and then in some instances, I've split it out so you can see the differences when they're really apparent. Cool. And then numbers. So over the two clearing periods, had over 31 million users on site, over 35 million sessions recorded, over 81 million page views, and over 2 minutes average session duration, which was 2 minutes and 15 seconds in 2019, and then 2 minutes and 39 seconds in 2020. Cool, let's just jump straight into display. So what did display look like on TSR over those two periods? So we delivered over 116 million impressions. So I'm sure we can share the slides, Marissa. Sorry, I just saw a question in there. So yeah, 116,747,382 impressions delivered over the two periods. So a massive amount of impressions delivered. We tracked over 86,507 clicks, and then the highest CTR was 0.35%, which is more than tripled the average, which is a really, really good results. So it's important to note that for all the display as well, all of the creatives included in this and used for this data delivered over 10,000 impressions to make sure that it's statistically valid, essentially. Because we obviously don't want like 100 impressions delivered in one click because the CTR would be skewed. So we want to make sure that it's all statistically valid. Cool. So these trends were made for talking about. So in this section, I'm going to cover the devices, ad sizes, ad formats, as in GIFs versus static, the colors, the messaging, the call to action trends, and then arranging your creative. And then we'll move on to kind of what to do and then what not to do as well. So the devices, I'm going to get my pointer. So as you can see, most of it is delivered on mobile, which you probably already know. So most people are on their mobile when they're browsing. So yeah, most of the impressions were delivered on mobile, most of the clicks were delivered on mobile, and then the Ctr comparison, which I found really interesting when I actually did the analysis of this, because for some reason, TV did really well, which I'm really surprised by, because I'm assuming that you'd have to use like the little pointers on your remote to click on the ad, which means that people that wanted to click on the ad on TV were really intent on doing so. And tablet featured well as well for CTR, so it actually performed 13.9% better in terms of CTR than mobile. But in most instances, I think it uses the mobile version of the site and thus the mobile version of all of the creatives. And then the ad sizes, so kind of reflecting what we're seeing with the devices. So the mobile leaderboard here owned most of the impressions, followed by the mid-page unit. The click ownership, again, the mobile leaderboard, and then followed by the mid-page unit. So it's important to note that the mid-page unit actually shows on mobile and on desktop. Whereas the mobile leaderboard obviously just shows on mobile. And then for the Ctr comparison, the mobile leaderboard actually did the best, but it did 8.6% better than the billboards, which are the big ad units on site. And then interestingly, 73.4% better than the leaderboards. So I think it's really important to think about if the creative is fit for size or fits for its purpose. It'll be in our key takeaways as well, but it's important to think about almost mobile first design, because most of the impressions and most of the engagement is coming from mobile versus desktop. So something to think about when you're designing your creatives. And we're going to move on to the format. So GIFs versus static. So out of the data that we have, so the data for this was taken from a sample. We need to traffic millions, as you saw, millions and millions of creatives and impressions. So this was taken from a sample, but should give a good indication of which is performing better. So GIFs were actually dominating the impression ownership and also the click ownership, which isn't surprising if it's delivering most of the impressions. But when it came to CTR, they still performed better than static. So on average, around 30.3% better than the static images, which kind of makes sense as you're able to get more information into GIFs versus static. So I did a bit of a trends that you can see. So from 2020 versus 2019, so GIFs were mostly quite long and kind of video animation style. So if you imagine in 2019, it was more like 3 to 5 frames. I want to say almost like strobe lighty. So like one frame would have like apply, and then the second frame would be like, we got this award, and etc. like that. Whereas this last clearing, it was more like fluid. It was almost like the text was like fading in and out instead of it being like that. Then the static images, which is really interesting, about 1/3 of them or 2/3 of them didn't contain any call to action at all, which is, it's the first year where I've done the analysis where it's been really, really apparent that there is no call to action, and actually became like a trend. So I'm going to cover it a bit more in the call to action graph of everything. But yeah, it was really, really interesting. And then I just have some recommendations for kind of what you should think about if you're trying to decide whether you should do GIFs or static images. So are you able to convey your messaging effectively on your chosen format? So for instance, let's say if you wanted to include like 30 words, a static image probably isn't going to do it unless you're doing it on Billboard. Because if you think like a mobile leaderboard, it's like 320 by 50 and it's tiny. You're not going to be able to fit in 30 words on that page or on that frame. Whereas with a GIF, you're able to include more words and you're able to do more rotations and do more interesting things on the creative. And then are you able to keep the file size below 100 kilobytes? So on our specs page, which definitely check out, we have the recommended sizes for each of the formats, but the max that we really do accept is 100 kilobytes. So making sure that you're able to keep it at 100 or below is really good. And then your logo on all frames, if you're doing a GIF. So you want to make sure that your branding is present on every single frame and not just like the last frame. It really just ensures that people know what they are looking at. So, yeah. And then we're going to move on to colors. So quite a massive contrast between the 2 years. So in 2019, as you can see, like it was a lot of kind of pink and red and kind of like in your face colors. They were quite like bright and yeah, like really like strong colors. Yeah, so majority of the creatives had these colors in there, but then these also featured in there as well. Flip to 2020 and it gets a lot darker. I think both for the colors and probably for how people were feeling. So yeah, kind of bluey, purpley hues. Basically the top, well, 4 out of the top 5, which is very, very interesting. So I have some psychological associations for the color. So in 2019, the pink and the red is kind of like energy and compassion and strength and power, but also on the like flip side for the cons of those colors, it's kind of like danger, like we have red signs when something is dangerous or we have to do something immediately, aggression and resentment. And then for the 2020, it's very non-threatening colors, and kind of like serene and calm. The purpley undertony can also kind of be like brave and kind of royal a little bit. It's quite of a royal color. It doesn't appear in nature that much, so it stands out a little bit. But the cons of that are also like sadness and loneliness and yeah, I think it's quite reflective of how people were probably feeling in 2020, which is interesting. So yeah, oh, sorry, Colin. So is the color changed in different advertiser, or was it the same advertiser changing the color theme? So there was quite a few instances of people using the same creatives for both of these periods, but for the most part, advertisers did change their color in their creatives from year to year. So I think it's a bit of both. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. Cool. And then we're going to move on to the messaging. So in 2019, it was very short, snappy, and assertive, and it really focused on places being available. So it was like, we've got places, you know, apply now. You have to do it now, call us now, because we have places and, you know, you have to go to university. There were some instances of a helpful and a caring tone though. But in 2020, that tone kind of took over from the kind of assertive tone. So the messaging for one was much, much longer. So almost conversational rather than, like I was saying with the GIFs, rather than kind of like flashing like short bursts of text. It was more conversational. It was very considerate and supportive. And I think there was a major focus on the why. So why should a student go to university, like that specific university, for example? And it focused on like purpose and belonging. And there was a lot of mentions of like joining a team or joining like a purpose. So I think universities really try to focus on if it's going to be difficult for students and they're kind of thinking about university, especially in a pandemic and stuff, understanding the why we as a university do this thing became really apparent. And I think it works really, really well. and it kind of combated any dip in performance. Let's say if you were to do a kind of assertive tone, which was, yeah, super interesting. Cool. We're going to move on to the call to actions. So in 2018 and 2019, hard CTA. So I'll actually just cover these bits here. So, so when I say soft CTAs, I mean kind of the, like, find out more, explore, that type of stuff. Hard CTAs, apply now, call us now. There's like urgency in it. And then no CTAs, just no call to action whatsoever. So in 2018 and 2019, the hard CTA was dominating the entire, like all of the creatives that did really well. Well, majority of the creatives that did really well. And the soft CTAs were kind of medaling below, although did do a little bit better in 2019 than in 2018. Then in 2020, it just completely got flipped over. The kind of hard CTAs, so like the urgency and assertive CTAs, took a dip. The soft CTAs rose, and the no CTA actually did the best, which was really, really interesting. So I don't have the data because it wasn't that apparent for 2019 and 2018. And I don't think it'd be a fair representation, but yeah, really saw it last year. Which makes me think if it's going to be the same in 2021, which would make sense if we're focusing on the why rather than a do an action right now. Cool. And then I'm going to talk about arranging your creative. So yeah, in 2019, so this is the 2019 and then this is the 2021. So in 2019, the best performing creatives from left to right started with the creative and the messaging, then moved on to the call to action and then displayed the logo, versus how it did in 2020, where it actually started with the logo and then went into like a conversational messaging and then moved into like the creative and the call to action if there was one. Interestingly, so in the 2019 creative is also how the 2018 creative was. So if we're following this short trend, we might have another round of the 2020 creative this year. With the announcement this week, I'm not entirely sure. I couldn't say for 100%, because if people are out and about and views change, especially during that period, because if we're aiming for June for lockdown stuff, I'm not 100%, but it wouldn't surprise me if this one makes another round of doing really, really well. Yeah, it's also the use of images in creatives isn't that popular for display. People don't seem to respond to it. So for example, like cutouts of people did really well in 2019. Cutouts of people did okay in 2020, but the creatives that didn't have any people in it at all did really well. So yeah, so I'm going to move on to what not to do, because I have an example of what it kind of shouldn't look like. So yeah, what to avoid for clearing 2021. So yeah, this kind of imagery. I don't know why, like they just don't respond to it at all. I think it's something to do with the busyness of how the creative looks. Also serif fonts. All of like the worst performing ones had text that was in serif. which is quite interesting. I think it's maybe something to do with kind of like heritage and old schooliness of a serif font that might be influencing. And we don't really see serif fonts, you know, on like Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or social media in general. It's mostly sans serif. Another thing was when you use too many variations of fonts. So I'd say stick to 2 if you can. So if the logo that you have at the moment has a serif font, for example, you can obviously do like a sans serif font for your messaging, but I would just keep it to those 2. Yeah, not including your logo on every frame in case of a GIF, using image heavy creatives, like I said. And then for some reason, these colors in 2020, people just didn't like them. I don't know why, I think they're beautiful. But yeah, like accents of green or like these kind of greeny shades were totally fine though. So kind of like little like graphics and stuff like that in the creatives was totally fine, but block colors of those just, yeah, didn't like them. And then we're going to move on to what to do or what you can do for clearing 2021. So kind of want to ask you guys to have a think about the call to action that you use throughout the year and what impact they have on the campaign performance. And can you use that to influence what you're going to do for clearing 2021? I've obviously shown you the graphs and I think we can share the slides after so you can have a better look at it. But yeah, definitely start to have a think about, and especially last year and the year before, and try to compare that. So keep your creatives clean, stay clean. So not too much clutter in the creatives. Like I talked about the images, not too kind of like photography, image heavy. And then if you're going to use photographs, make sure to include the faces looking head on. There's something about it where you look to the side, it doesn't feel as engaging. I know I'm doing it now because I'm looking at the presentation. But yeah, there's something about it that the students just don't respond to as well. I think it's about the connection that you get when like a face is head on rather than looking to the side or the back of someone's head. Can the positioning of your words be an actual part of the design? And what I mean by that is that it kind of feels like the words fit into your design rather than being on top of the design. It's kind of what I'm going to circle back quickly. Kind of what I mean like this here, if you guys can see it, where it kind of feels like it's part of it rather than sitting outside of it. Should be really good. Split test your creatives. Yeah, so make sure that you split test them. Like we can always split test them if you send them to us, and we can see which one does better. And should hopefully get a better performance overall as well. And then, yeah, strong brand work ahead of clearing. So making sure that students are familiar with your brand and your purpose ahead of clearing. And that's it for display. So we're going to move on to emails now. So some stats for emails. Yeah, over the 2 clearing periods, 9.6 million emails delivered, 3.6 million email opens, which is insane. 107,677 total clicks on campaign links. And the highest recorded CTO, which is the click to open rate, was 39%, which is just astounding. So, yeah. And then the data. So if we talk a bit about the data. So first I'm going to cover the templates. So I'm hoping you've all seen the templates that we have on the specs page. If not, I'm happy to send the link out so you guys can see afterwards what they look like. So we got template 1, template 2, and template 4, and then the HTML is if you supply your own HTML, essentially. So sent ownership over those 2 periods. So template 2 and HTML were the most popular to send out, which is reflected then in the unique open ownership. But interestingly, the open rate comparison, it's kind of split out, except for poor template 3. I think it's because it's quite wordy. It's quite a wordy template. It just in clearing, it just, yeah, didn't seem to like it either. So, cool. And then unique click ownership, and this is where it kind of gets really interesting. So the overall clicks that happen, or the unique clicks that happened overall, most of them were on template 2. But when then you compare that to the open rate, it's still template 2 that performed the best, but only slightly above template 1, like ever so slightly, like there's like 0.2%, if I remember correctly. Yeah, it's very, very close in how they did. Yeah, then followed by template 4 and then HTML, this one here. So template 4, HTML, and then template 3. Yeah, if you're going to design the HTML, I'd really urge you to look at template 1 and template 2, just to get some like inspiration for how you could potentially set up your HTML in the future. And then we're going to move on to subject lines. So these are the word trends from the top performing subject lines. So subject lines that got an above the average benchmark open rate. So I don't think there's any real surprises in here. Maybe it's time, which was interesting. But yeah, clearing places, clearing core, September, like X subject place, so like psychology place or study psychology at X university. All the subject lines were short and impactful though. The university name was often mentioned in the subject line as well. Courses were mentioned, and then the slight urgency with like the date. So like there's a place in September, or apply now for September, which is, yeah, which kind of makes sense. It makes sense. Cool. So subject lines continued. So I want to talk a bit about split testing your subject lines. And the message essentially is always split test. We did send out most of our emails split testing, and then no surprise that most of the opens were through a split test. But if we look down here at the click to open comparison, it's still doing better than the non-split tested emails. So definitely send over a split test. So we can do 2 subject lines to split test. Yeah, and it just ensures that I always get a better performance. Perfect. So I'm going to move on to the messaging in emails now. So yeah, the messaging, short and to the point. So no kind of waffle at all. Very supportive tone throughout, like a very, very supportive tone. There were quite a few mentions of here for you, which was interesting, across different advertisers, which was, yeah, very interesting. And then I just wanted to mention as well that like this is your opportunity to speak to students, so make sure that you have accessible messaging. And what I kind of mean for accessible messaging is that anybody could access it. yeah, anybody at all, regardless of their social status or anything else. Yeah, offer resources and support. And then honest reviews about your uni from current students would also be a great addition. I would love to see that, and I think it will go down very, very well. Yeah, obviously not the entire review, but like linking out to your site for the review. And then imagery. So flipped from display, now they love like images, kind of busy images and everything like that. So image heavy creatives are definitely preferred in emails. There were some variations in the header images, where kind of graphics were put in, or like half images with like text on one side and stuff like that. Lots of geometric shapes in 2020 as well. Yeah, so, but for the subsections, it was all just images. But I think it's important to note that every image is like a massive call to action button. And so definitely treat it as such when you're designing the creatives for your emails. And we'll always make sure that they're clickable as well. So you can see, yeah, so people can just click on it straight away. Cool, I'm gonna move on to the call to actions now. So we had a lot of wraparound in our emails. And what I mean by that is at the header section and at the footer, it was like apply now, call us now. And then in the subsections, we had a lot of like find out more, like get alerts, which I love that one. It's such a good one. New vacancies and stuff like that. The most popular hard call to action was apply now. I think about 50% of the emails I analyzed had the apply now in the header section for the like top performing ones. And then lots of courses and vacancies mentions in the soft CTAs as well, which is, yeah, very good. So I'm going to move on to what to avoid now. So this phase, it gets me every time. We want to avoid this for sure. So inaccessible language and complicated grammar, definitely. Using an unsupportive language and tone, long call to actions and long, just long sentences in general. The use of trigger words, and the use of triggering words. So when I say trigger words, I mean like free, guaranteed, and in that vein, like then and stuff like that. Essentially words that affect the deliverability of the email. And then what I mean by triggering words is anything that could potentially trigger anyone. So essentially nothing that could affect someone's like mental health or call out someone's social status or anything like that. Definitely avoid that. And then unengaging header images. So yeah, essentially avoid this. So for the header image, definitely make sure that your logo's in here, have something intriguing about the image, and then keep your text short, condense it down, and don't make it grammatically difficult to understand or use difficult language or confusing language. Yeah, and then moving on to what to do. So what can we do for Clearing 2021? So get the most out of your subject lines by keeping them short and to the point, and definitely mention some of the words that we spoke about before, so like clearing and stuff like that. So be supportive and adapt a tone that reflects that. So reflects that supportiveness. Every image is clickable, so make sure that there's a CTA incorporated into your image, even in the subsection ones. And then if you must use trigger words, so I don't know, let's say guaranteed, like the word guaranteed is part of your overall campaign. Include it into the image, because once it's in the image, it won't affect the deliverability of your email. and don't include it in your actual copy. And it should be absolutely fine to send it out like that. Cool. So I'm gonna do a quick visual recap of the display and email. So we just move on to this. Yeah. Kind of like what I've been saying. So more of this here. So kind of clean looking creatives. Try to incorporate your text as being a part of the design. I think it's potentially up to you whether you'd like to do the more conversational language or if you want to do the more kind of like snappy and assertive, like based on the data that you have from your previous campaigns. But yeah, definitely avoid these large images and the text that doesn't actually fit into that design. Yeah, and the logo down here, I actually saw this, which I forgot to mention earlier. Yeah, creatives that had the logo kind of on the bottom of the creative didn't do well either. Just don't respond to it. And I think it feels like an afterthought if it's down here. So it kind of feels like, oh, like cool, they've said all of these things. And then there was an afterthought about the brand. And then for email, which I just covered, but yeah, avoiding this and then doing this, which I think looks so much better and it's so much more engaging. And keep your text short. Because in essence, you want people to click onto your site. So you want to give them enough information that they know what they're going to be clicking on, but also to entice them to find out more. Yeah, and make sure that you're including your call to action in the images as well. And yeah, people in emails as well do really, really well as opposed to display. So it's kind of flipped on its head if you compare the two, which is quite interesting. But I think it's to do with the space that you're absorbing the information from. So when you're on a website, it kind of feels like you're out of your space. But when you're in your email, like it's your email rather than out in the world. So I think maybe it's something to do with that, but I'm hypothesizing about what it could actually be. Cool. I'm going to move on to the key takeaways and then we can do some questions. It'd be lovely to hear from you guys. Cool. So the key takeaways. So your audience should be familiar with your brand, your purpose, and your ethos heading into clearing. So if you're able to accomplish that, that would be absolutely amazing. And yeah, it just means that when we go into clearing, that they kind of know. It's almost like, like buying a car, if you're about to buy a car and a new brand comes in when you're trying to decide, do you trust that or the brand you've heard about for the past like 2 years or whatever. Cool. Mobile first design. So lead with designing for mobile and then for desktop. Yeah, as I spoke about earlier, most of the display is happening on mobile. Most of the emails are actually happening on mobile. Make sure that you're starting from that point. Because what I've seen happen is that like a billboard or a leaderboard, which is like much bigger than a mobile leaderboard, will get designed. And then in order to create the mobile leaderboard, everything just gets shrunk, which means that you can't really read what's in the creative. It becomes really difficult to absorb that information. And if you're trying to capture attention and trying to make your message come across, like tiny text isn't going to do it. So yeah, lead with mobile, figure out what you can do with the mobile one, and then expand it out to the rest of your creatives. Oh, sorry. Don't know if you heard that, but perks of working from home. Cool. And then make sure your creative is fit for its size and the device it will be shown on. So the IAB actually did some research and they found that around 78% of people that saw ads that weren't fit for its purpose just ignored them. So yeah, definitely make sure that it's fit for its size and the device it will be shown on, which feeds into the mobile first design or how you attack the design. And then minimal use of imagery in display and heavy use of imagery in emails, in particular the subsections, so kind of flipped. So if you're really wanting to use images as a part of your campaign, maybe do like cutouts of that image in your display, but then use the full image in your email. And I think it'd be a really nice like continuity of your campaign. So what they see on site, they also get in their inbox. And then when they go onto your website, it might be there as well. So I think it just builds your brand and builds the authority and familiarity with your brand as well. Then know your target audience and make sure your creative captures their attention. So your audience is going to change all the time. And also I mean that in the way like the audience you want to target will change, but figuring out like what are their interests, like what do they do when they get bored, for example, what excites them, like what words do you need to say to them to grab their attention, what creatives would grab their attention. But obviously if you don't know and you're still trying to figure it out, we can obviously help with like split testing and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely make sure that you're thinking about that when you're designing your creative. And then make sure that your creative reflects the emotion you're aiming to convey. So are you being supportive? Are you being authoritative? Are you XYZ? So yeah, figure out what emotion you're trying to convey and then make sure that your creative actually does a job of doing that. And then avoid complicated messaging and make your creative accessible to everyone. So yeah, like I've been saying, yeah, language, grammar, length of sentences, even structure of your paragraphs, etc. Yeah, just make sure it's accessible for everyone. And then I wanted to leave you with a final question to have a think about after this. I don't expect everyone to know the answer to this now, but something to definitely think about when you're thinking about the campaign and the creatives that will be within that campaign. If you were to make £30,000 plus investment during the most stressful time of your life, what would you want to know? So what would you want to see? What would grab your attention? What would you need to know? Like, would you need to know reviews about it? Would you need to know what funding options were available, etc.? But definitely have a think about it, because I think it's a really important question. And I think once you know the answer to that, the rest will follow quite easily. So that's me. So I have some time for some questions and some comments and some feedback. So I don't know, Marissa, do you?
Hello, here I am. Yeah, we've had some really good questions throughout the webinar. Thank you everybody for being here. By the way, there's a lot of you and it's always so exciting to see that engagement there. Please stay around. The webinar is not over, but we will use this time now to cover some questions. So I don't know if you want to look at these questions yourself, Hulda, in the Q&A box. I've answered some of them, which were mainly about the assets to this webinar. Absolutely, the assets will be emailed over to you guys, we think tomorrow, but I didn't want to be overly ambitious in that promise, but certainly over the next few working days. But we do have a question here from David Handy. Hulda, can you see that?
Yeah, I can see it.
I'll give you an opportunity to answer that in real time.
Perfect, yeah. So the question is, do we envisage this year that the soft CTA may be most effective given the year that we've had with the ever-changing landscape? Definitely, yeah. I foresee, I think the hard CTAs are on the decline for sure. And I think people need that support and the opportunity to just like find out more. And I think it's a really good opportunity with like a soft CTA to get them onto your site where you're able to influence a little bit more how they then take in the information from that point. So you could have like, I don't know, like boxes with like information in it, and then at the bottom, like apply now or whatever. But yeah, I think definitely soft CTAs and potentially no CTAs at all will do better than the hard CTAs this year. Does that answer your question? Sorry, I think so. Yeah.
I think that was a brilliant answer, Hulda, and I think if there's some further follow-ups, we can absolutely you know, engage with individuals. Oh, thank you, David. That's fab. Okay, so the next one we have from an anonymous attendee, but it was about the color palettes reflective. Were the color palettes reflective of imagery too, or just the background graphic elements?
So both. So it took into account the background elements and the imagery in the creative. So essentially how I've gotten the colors is to put all of the creatives together and then figure out what colors are the most prominent. So it includes both of them. So both the images and the colors in the background. What I have done though is exclude the like whites and the blacks, because usually the text is either white or black on top of the images. So they're not represented in that. Yeah, no worries.
Fab. So we've had a question from Lacey asking if a template could be sent out. Now, I'm not sure if that's whether that's a template for the content of this webinar or something else. But
maybe was it the templates for the emails?
In any event, yes, thanks, Lacey.
Okay, yeah, definitely, I'll send that out.
Fab, so we can do that. And then we have a final question here. That they didn't hear the answer to Colin's question. It said, how different was the profile of advertisers in 2019 versus 2020?
I think that was in relation to the colors, I believe. So some of the advertisers use the exact same color palette and actually the exact same creatives, which I don't recommend. So I think what happened was that you run a creative once and it does really well. And so you obviously want to replicate that result. I think there's a bit of fatigue and it doesn't represent, or it doesn't resonate with the like, because the year 12s would have seen it when you did it for year 13s, and then when they come back, I think it's a bit like they just don't respond to it. But did see change in colors within the creatives from the same advertiser, so they're changing up everything. Obviously, like it's usually within the brand guidelines of that particular advertiser. So I'm sure you all have like color palettes that you adhere to. But yeah, incorporating those, but changing it up a bit. Although some of them are changed completely. But yeah, majority of it, they had their colors changed throughout.
Thank you, Hulda. That's excellent. It looks like we may have had, so another question asking about the split testing process. Can you explain that a bit further, please, Hulda?
Yeah, of course. So I'll cover both the split testing for display and split testing for email. So the split testing for display, we can actually do it a variety of ways, but what we do is you supply everything that you want to split test. So you supply like all of your display, for example. And then what we do is we put all of the creatives to the audience that you're willing to or looking to target. we serve that, and then we're able to see, so we serve that evenly across everything. And then we're able to see like creative A, for example, does better than creative B. And then we can feed that back to you. Or if you're happy to, we just optimize from that point on. And just the best performing creative always gets optimized. So it could be like creative B or whatever. And that then gets optimized. And then you're able to see at the end of the campaign or in the mid-campaign report how those creatives are performing. Alternatively, you can definitely request that we only use a portion of your booked impressions. So if you book, let's say 100,000 impressions, you could say like, oh, I want like 20% of that to go towards split testing. And then we can do that, feedback the results, and then you can make a decision on what you would like to use to go forward. Split testing for emails, kind of similar, you just provide us with the 2 subject lines that you're looking to split test. We then split tested, so we send it out to the audience, but we split test with 20% of the audience for about 2 hours. So we'll send out the 2 subject lines, like each getting 10%, so it's 20% in total. And then whichever performs best gets the remainder 80% of the send sent to them. We can split test in 2 ways. So we can either split test based on the open rate performance or the click to open performance. So if you're looking for a specific, if you're looking for like I would like the clicks and not the open rate, we can definitely do that, but just let us know.
Thank you so much. I'm sure we can all agree, Hulda, you're an absolute font of knowledge. And for those of you who've not really worked with Hulda, she's the person out there in delivering all of your wonderful campaigns. So it's really great that she's had this opportunity to share all of that wisdom with you. Thank you, Mark. We've just had a thank you. That's really helpful. So I think this is coming to a nice natural end. I wouldn't be a marketer if I didn't remind you all that we have a couple of days left of our clearing discount. So if this has helped you make up your mind, do ensure that you get in touch with your account manager or email us at hello@, and we will hook you up. Otherwise though, yeah, I look forward to seeing you all soon, and look forward to sharing more of our insights over the next coming weeks. Thank you all, and have a great rest of the week. Bye.
Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.